Just the ATM. Those 3 words, whispered by my mother-in-law to my husband when she thought I wasn't listening, shattered what should have been a temporary family arrangement during their financial crisis. Standing in the hallway outside, our bedroom, hearing the woman I'd welcomed into my home dismiss me so coldly after I'd spent thousands supporting her family, I watched my husband David's face, not in shock or defense of me, but in quiet agreement. But what neither of them knew was that I had been preparing for this moment for 5 months, and my secret bank statement would reveal decisions that would change everything. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The dim light from our kitchen highlighted the tension in David's face as he fumbled with excuses, claiming his mother didn't mean it that way, that I was misinterpreting her words. His performance was almost convincing, complete with concerned looks and reminders about family loyalty during hard times. But I had stopped believing his performances weeks ago. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on me as I stood in my own home, the same home I had opened to his family when they were evicted from their apartment 3 months earlier. Neighbors occasionally dropped by with welcome baskets for our guests, completely unaware they were witnessing the final act of an 8-year marriage built on emotional manipulation and carefully maintained lies about family obligations. David Matthews had always been a master of appearances. At 35, with warm brown eyes and the charming demeanor of a dedicated high school history teacher, he commanded respect in every classroom and social gathering he entered. Our friends in the quiet suburb of Riverside knew him as the compassionate educator who stayed late helping struggling students, who drove a modest sedan, and who had seemingly balanced his career with supporting both his new wife and his family through difficult times. What they didn't know was that behind the caring teacher persona, David had been systematically prioritizing his birth family's financial needs over our marriage for years, creating a parallel financial reality that I was expected to maintain without question. The supportive son and brother identity was maintained through an elaborate web of emotional appeals, family emergency narratives, and manipulative guilt tactics that had finally reached their inevitable conclusion with his entire family, mother, father, and adult sister, taking over our modest 3-bedroom home. I am Samantha Matthews, 33 years old. Until this moment, I had been known primarily as David's supportive wife and a successful marketing executive at a growing tech company in Sacramento. My professional identity had been leveraged as the financial foundation of not just our household, but increasingly David's extended family, with most people viewing me as the fortunate beneficiary of his emotional intelligence, rather than recognizing how my career success was being exploited. For years, I had played the role of the understanding spouse who managed our household finances, while David focused on his teaching career and maintaining his family relationships. I had organized our budget, maintained our savings goals, and ensured that our financial future seemed secure. Meanwhile, he pursued his passion for education, while becoming increasingly entangled in his family's recurring financial emergencies that somehow always required our immediate attention and resources. The gradual infiltration of David's family into our financial and emotional lives had begun innocently enough. First came the occasional loans to his sister Melissa for her college textbooks, then helping his parents with an unexpected medical bill. These seemed like reasonable requests. From family members going through temporary hardships, David would present each situation with such genuine concern, his eyes conveying both worry for his family and appreciation for my understanding. They'd do the same for us, he'd assure me, though that reciprocal support never materialized. As months turned into years, the financial requests grew more frequent and substantial. His father's business failure led to helping with their mortgage payment. Just for a few months, David promised. His sister's car broke down and needed replacing for her to continue college. His mother's dental work wasn't covered by insurance. Each emergency was framed as the last major hurdle before his family would achieve stability, each sacrifice on our part described as temporary. Our financial boundaries dissolved so gradually, I barely noticed their disappearance. Birthday gifts to his family became extravagant, while mine became thoughtful but inexpensive. Vacations were postponed to help with yet another family crisis. Our retirement savings contributions were temporarily reduced, then eliminated entirely, as more of our income was redirected to supporting his parents and sister. Throughout this progression, I maintained the image of the supportive wife, the understanding daughter-in-law, the financially successful woman who could afford to help. Family in need. In our social circles, David's dedication to his family was admired as a virtue, while my growing discomfort was interpreted as selfishness whenever I expressed even mild concern about the sustainability of our financial arrangements. The turning point came 3 months ago when David received the desperate call from his mother. His parents had finally been evicted from their apartment after months of partial payments and landlord patience. They had nowhere to go, and David's sister was living with them. Without consulting me first, David had invited them to stay with us, just until they get back on their feet. What was presented as a 2-week emergency solution quickly transformed into a permanent living arrangement as his family moved in with carloads of belongings, taking over our guest bedroom, home office, and most of our communal living space. Our peaceful home became a chaotic household, dominated by his mother's cooking preferences, his father's constant television watching, and his sister's endless complaints about her job search. My home office, where I often worked late into the evening on important marketing campaigns, was converted into Melissa's bedroom, forcing me to work at the kitchen table amidst constant interruptions and noise. The financial burden intensified as our utility bills doubled, our grocery expenses tripled, and additional costs appeared for his family's needs that somehow always became our responsibility. Through it all, David expected me to maintain my demanding career that funded this arrangement while also accommodating his family's presence with grace and understanding. My growing resentment was met with accusations of being unwelcoming, ungenerous, and failing to understand how families support each other. The emotional manipulation reached new heights as David positioned himself as torn between his unreasonable wife and his struggling family, rather than as a husband who should be creating boundaries to protect his marriage. What David and his family didn't realize was that their presence in our home had triggered a transformation within me that would ultimately reshape all of our lives. While outwardly playing the role of accommodating hostess and financial provider, I had been secretly documenting the systematic exploitation of my resources, consulting with financial advisors, and developing an exit strategy that would protect what remained of my assets and future. The realization that I was viewed as nothing more than a financial resource, just the ATM, as his mother so bluntly put it, provided the final confirmation I needed. The woman who had welcomed her son's family into her home during crisis, who had sacrificed privacy and financial security to support them, was reduced to a faceless banking machine existing solely to fund their needs and wants without expectation of respect or reciprocity. That overheard conversation in the hallway, where David nodded in agreement with his mother's assessment, shattered the last illusion that our marriage could be salvaged. The man I had married, who had once talked about partnership and shared dreams, had revealed his true priorities. I was not his partner, but merely a convenient source of funding for the family that would always come first in his heart and mind. As I stood there processing this painful revelation, I felt an unexpected sense of clarity and resolve replacing the hurt and confusion that had plagued me for months. The woman who had been manipulated into sacrificing her financial security was awakening to her power and agency. The path forward was suddenly crystal clear, illuminated by the harsh truth of those 3 dismissive words. The journey that led me to this defining moment, standing in my own hallway, branded as just the ATM, began long before David's family moved into our home. Understanding how I arrived at this crisis point requires examining the path that led me to marry David Matthews and the gradual erosion of my financial independence that made his family's exploitation possible. 9 years earlier, I had been Samantha Reynolds, an ambitious marketing graduate from UC Davis, with a promising career at Elevate Digital, one of Sacramento's fastest-growing digital marketing agencies. My specialty was developing comprehensive brand strategies for tech startups, work that involved understanding consumer psychology and creating compelling narratives that would attract both users and investors. The irony of my professional expertise in detecting manipulative messaging while remaining blind to the emotional manipulation in my personal life was not lost on me as I began recognizing the patterns in my marriage, the skills that had made me successful in identifying authentic brand values had been overpowered during the years when I focused on building what I thought was a partnership with David and supporting what I believed were legitimate family emergencies. My meeting with David had occurred during the most promising period of my professional life. At 24, I had just been promoted to senior brand strategist and had developed a reputation for insightful analysis and innovative campaign development that helped clients secure millions in funding and user growth. My work was intellectually stimulating and financially rewarding, providing both personal satisfaction and professional recognition that positioned me for director-level consideration within a few years. David had been introduced to me through colleagues at a fundraiser for the local education foundation. At 26, he was establishing his reputation as a dedicated history teacher with a genuine passion for making historical events relevant to modern teenagers. His thoughtful commentary on educational inequality and enthusiasm for his students' achievements were immediately attractive to someone who valued intellectual engagement and social contribution. Our courtship had been meaningful and connecting, characterized by thoughtful conversations about books and social issues, weekend hikes in the Sierra foothills, and simple but intimate dinners where we shared our hopes for making a difference in our respective fields. David presented himself as someone who valued independence and partnership in relationships, expressing admiration for my career ambitions and encouraging my professional growth. The proposal came after 2 years of dating, presented during a weekend trip to Napa Valley where David had arranged for a private wine tasting at a small family vineyard. The ring was a modest but elegant diamond in a vintage setting that perfectly matched my preference for understated quality over flashy displays. It represented what I thought was David's understanding of my values and his respect for my aesthetic preferences. Our wedding was an intimate gathering at the Sacramento Botanical Gardens with 75 guests, including family and close friends from our professional circles. David insisted on managing most of the arrangements, claiming that his summer break from teaching gave him time to coordinate the details while I focused on an important marketing campaign launch. The ceremony and reception were beautiful, though, notably more expensive than the modest celebration I had envisioned, with several upgraded elements that David insisted were worth it for our special day. The early years of our marriage had been genuinely happy as we established our life together in a rented apartment near downtown Sacramento. I continued my career trajectory at Elevate Digital, while David taught at a well-regarded public high school. We enjoyed the lifestyle that dual professional incomes provided, though I noticed early on that David was less focused on saving than I was, preferring to live in the moment and trust that our financial future would work out naturally. The first subtle shift in our financial dynamic occurred when David's sister Melissa decided to attend college in Sacramento to be closer to us. David immediately offered to help with her expenses, assuring me it would be temporary until she secured better financial aid. What began as occasional grocery shopping for her apartment gradually expanded to paying portions of her rent, covering her car insurance, and providing an unofficial monthly stipend that David administered from our joint account. When I expressed concerns about the growing financial commitment, David framed my hesitation as a failure to understand the importance of family support and educational opportunity. My parents helped me through college, he would remind me, conveniently omitting that they had covered only a portion of his expenses while he worked part-time and secured scholarships for the remainder. We're just paying it forward, he would add, creating a narrative of generational responsibility that made any objection seem selfish and short-sighted. The opportunity to purchase our home came as my career advanced to Director of Client Strategy, bringing a substantial salary increase and performance bonus. The 3-bedroom house in Riverside represented a significant investment in our future, with space for a home office and eventually children. The mortgage was manageable based on our combined incomes, though we had to stretch our budget more than I was comfortable with after David insisted on a neighborhood with an excellent school district for our future kids. The financial infiltration by David's family accelerated after we became homeowners. His parents began visiting more frequently, often staying for extended weekends that stretched into week-long visits. Each visit brought new revelations about their financial difficulties, credit card debt from his mother's medical expenses, property tax increases they couldn't afford, repair costs for their aging car. David would present each situation with a mixture of concern and implied obligation, positioning us, particularly me with my successful corporate job, as their safety net. The pattern became predictable. A family financial crisis would emerge. David would present it as temporary and unavoidable. I would express concern about our own financial security, and he would respond with emotional appeals about family loyalty. "What would you do if it were your parents?" he would ask. Knowing my parents were financially independent and had never asked for support. "Family takes care of family," he would insist, implying that my reluctance revealed some character flaw rather than legitimate financial prudence. The most significant financial intervention occurred when his father's small landscaping business began failing during an economic downturn. Without consulting me first, David had committed $15,000 from our emergency fund to help his father avoid bankruptcy, presenting it as a loan that would be repaid when business improved. The business closed permanently 6 months later. The money was never returned, and any mention of the lost funds was met with defensive accusations about my materialistic priorities. My attempts to establish financial boundaries were consistently undermined through emotional manipulation that positioned me as the villain in a narrative about family devotion. David would praise my career success publicly while privately framing it as an obligation to support his struggling family members. "You're blessed with opportunities they never had," he would remind me, creating a guilt-based framework that made financial boundaries feel like moral failings. The gradual nature of this financial exploitation made it difficult to identify a clear turning point where helping family became enabling dependency. Each individual request seemed reasonable in isolation, but the cumulative effect was a one-way flow of resources from our household to his family, with no reciprocity or endpoint. The narrative of temporary assistance had become a permanent arrangement, with no acknowledgement of its impact on our financial security or relationship dynamic. The warning signs had been present for years before I developed the motivation and clarity to recognize them systematically. Credit card statements showed unexplained charges that David attributed to picking up a few things for mom and dad. Our savings account balance grew more slowly than our income would suggest, with withdrawals that coincided with his sister's tuition deadlines. Vacation plans were routinely postponed due to newly emerged family emergencies that required our financial intervention. My attempts to discuss financial concerns were consistently deflected through explanations that emphasized temporary circumstances and family obligation. David's presentation of our financial situation always included assurances about future improvements, promises of repayment that never materialized, and emotional appeals that questioned my compassion and family values rather than addressing the substantive financial issues. The psychological manipulation involved in these discussions was sophisticated and effective, combining appeals to generosity and family loyalty with subtle implications about my character and values. David's responses to financial questions consistently made me feel selfish and materialistic, for expressing concern about matters that were framed as moral imperatives rather than financial decisions. The transformation from successful independent professional to family financial resource had occurred gradually, through a combination of circumstances that seemed reasonable individually, but created cumulative vulnerability that I didn't recognize until the situation became untenable. The tawa professional confidence that had characterized my early career had been systematically undermined by a relationship dynamic that positioned my financial success as an obligation rather than an achievement. Reactivating my self-protective instincts required acknowledging that my trust in David had been misplaced and that my financial security depended on my own awareness and action rather than his partnership. The process of rebuilding professional confidence while managing the emotional impact of discovering systematic exploitation was challenging but ultimately empowering, as I realized that my capabilities had been diminished only by manipulation rather than genuine loss. The investigation that began with questions about our dwindling savings gradually expanded to encompass every aspect of our financial relationship as I discovered the scope of David's prioritization of his family's needs over our marital partnership. Each new revelation provided additional motivation for developing the knowledge and resources necessary to protect myself and plan for an independent future, regardless of whether our marriage could be salvaged. My marketing background provided the analytical framework for understanding psychological manipulation and identifying the patterns that had allowed this situation to develop. However, the emotional strength required to continue investigating, despite increasingly disturbing discoveries, came from recognizing that my future security depended on my ability to understand and address the financial imbalance that David's family priorities had created. The systematic documentation of the financial outflow to David's family served multiple purposes, including building evidence for potential legal proceedings, developing understanding of the true cost of this one-sided arrangement, and creating a foundation for strategic planning that would protect my interests regardless of how our marital situation was ultimately resolved. The process was methodical and comprehensive, treating our family finances as a case study in resource exploitation that required professional-level analysis and documentation. The most difficult aspect of the investigation was maintaining normal interactions with David and his family while accumulating evidence of their exploitation and preparing for the eventual confrontation that would end our marriage as I had known it. The performance required careful emotional control and strategic thinking about timing and presentation that would maximize my advantages while minimizing risks to my security and professional reputation. The foundation that supported my transformation, from exploited provider to strategic planner, included not only professional skills and analytical thinking, but also personal relationships and resources that provided guidance and support during the most challenging period of my life. Building a support system while maintaining secrecy about my activities required careful consideration of who could be trusted with sensitive information and who might inadvertently compromise my position through well-intentioned but inappropriate communication with David or his family. The precise moment when suspicion crystallized into certainty occurred on a rainy Tuesday evening in March, when I discovered a handwritten budget sheet tucked inside David's lesson planner while searching for stamps in his desk drawer. The document contained allocations for his parents' cell phone payments, his sister's upcoming summer tuition, and a family emergency fund that diverted nearly 40% of my monthly income to his family's expenses, all written in David's neat teacher handwriting and labeled Family Support Plan 2025. Sitting at his desk with the physical evidence of his systematic financial planning that entirely prioritized his birth family over our marriage, I experienced a moment of perfect clarity that transformed 8 years of marriage into an elaborate scheme that I could no longer ignore or rationalize. The budget spreadsheet represented not just financial betrayal, but a complete violation of the partnership and shared decision-making that marriage was supposed to represent. The document revealed multiple planned expenses for his family members, including a vacation fund for his parents, a new laptop for his sister, and monthly allowances that bore no relationship to legitimate emergency needs or temporary assistance. The amounts involved were substantial, totaling over $45,000 in planned expenditures for the coming year alone, nearly half of my after-tax income and far more than David contributed to our household from his teaching salary. More disturbing than the unauthorized allocations was a section labeled contingency plans that outlined strategies for addressing my potential resistance to these financial commitments. The notes included phrases like, emphasize mom's health concerns, and remind Sam about family loyalty, clearly documenting the emotional manipulation tactics that would be employed to overcome any objections I might raise to this one-sided financial arrangement. The psychological impact of this discovery was immediate and overwhelming, creating a sensation of having been living in an alternate reality, while everything I believed about my marriage disintegrated around me. The comfortable partnership I had thought we were building was revealed to be a carefully constructed illusion maintained through increasingly sophisticated emotional manipulation that positioned my success as a resource to be harvested rather than a shared achievement to be celebrated. My initial response was disbelief and desperate hope that there must be some explanation for what I had found. Perhaps this was a worst-case scenario planning exercise, or maybe David was trying to organize the chaotic financial demands from his family into something more manageable. However, my professional experience in analyzing strategic planning documents made it impossible to ignore the deliberate and comprehensive nature of this financial roadmap that clearly indicated long-term, systematic exploitation rather than ad hoc assistance or temporary support. The realization that my husband had been methodically planning the redistribution of my income to his family created a psychological crisis that challenged every assumption I had made about our relationship and our future together. The man I had trusted as my life partner had been operating from a fundamentally different understanding of our marriage, one where my primary value was as a financial provider for his extended family, rather than as an equal partner with shared goals and priorities. The immediate question that confronted me was whether to confront David directly with what I had discovered or to conduct further investigation before revealing my knowledge of his systematic planning. My marketing strategy experience suggested that premature confrontation would likely result in damage control rather than honest communication. A new narrative would be constructed to explain away the evidence, while more sophisticated concealment methods would be implemented to prevent further discovery. The decision to investigate systematically before confrontation required emotional strength and strategic thinking that challenged every instinct for immediate resolution. Maintaining normal interactions while secretly documenting financial exploitation felt fundamentally dishonest. Yet the evidence already discovered suggested that the situation was far more calculated than I had initially understood, and that incomplete information would result in inadequate protection for my interests. The investigation methodology I developed drew upon professional techniques from marketing strategy and competitive analysis, adapted to the unique challenges of investigating someone with intimate knowledge of my daily routines and access to all aspects of our shared life. The approach required careful consideration of timing, documentation methods, and security measures that would prevent detection while building comprehensive understanding of the actual financial dynamics within our marriage. My first systematic step was to request comprehensive credit reports for both David and myself through all three major credit reporting agencies. These reports would provide independent verification of accounts, loans, and credit inquiries that might not be reflected in statements or documents that David controlled. The process required using my work address to ensure that reports were delivered to locations that David could not monitor. The credit reports revealed a financial landscape that was far more troubling than even my worst suspicions had suggested. Multiple credit cards had been opened in David's name, with balances that were not reflected in our household budget discussions, many carrying substantial charges at restaurants and retailers during times when he claimed to be working late at school. 2 personal loans had been taken out in the past year, neither of which had been mentioned or reflected in our joint financial planning. Most alarming was the discovery that David had applied for and received a home equity line of credit that used our residence as collateral without my knowledge. While my signature appeared on the documents, the handwriting was clearly not mine. A forgery that created legal obligations against our most significant asset without my consent or awareness. This arrangement meant that our home equity was being systematically drained to support his family's lifestyle, while our own financial security was increasingly compromised. The timeline revealed by the credit reports indicated that David's financial deception had been escalating for over 4 years, with new accounts and larger loan amounts being acquired with increasing frequency as existing obligations became more difficult to service. The pattern suggested someone who was desperately trying to maintain multiple financial commitments through increasingly risky borrowing arrangements rather than honest communication or priority setting. The emotional toll of conducting secret investigations while maintaining normal marital interactions was substantial and required developing coping strategies that would prevent my growing knowledge and anger from compromising the information-gathering process. The performance required for family dinners, social events, and ordinary household conversations demanded acting skills that I had never needed to develop for any previous personal or professional challenge. The most difficult aspect of the investigation was maintaining appropriate responses to David's continued assertions about family responsibility and his requests for increased financial support for his relatives who were now living in our home. Every conversation required careful consideration of how to respond, without revealing my knowledge while avoiding complicity in activities that I now understood were harmful to my financial security and emotional well-being. The support system that I began developing during this period included professional relationships with attorneys and financial advisors who could provide expert guidance while maintaining confidentiality about my situation. Building these relationships required careful research to identify professionals who specialized in cases involving financial deception within marriages and who could provide services without creating records that David might discover through shared mail or email accounts. The legal consultation process revealed that California's community property laws would provide certain protections for my interests if the marriage could not be salvaged, but that optimal outcomes would require systematic documentation of assets, debts, and financial misconduct before any formal proceedings were initiated. The attorneys emphasized that preparation and evidence would be crucial for protecting my rights and ensuring appropriate resolution of financial entanglements. Financial planning consultations focused on strategies for establishing independent security while protecting assets that were being put at risk due to David's unauthorized borrowing and family commitments. These discussions required honest assessment of my earning potential and lifestyle requirements, forcing me to confront the reality that my financial independence had been compromised by shared financial arrangements and legal obligations that David had created without my informed consent. The process of rebuilding professional confidence and financial independence began during this investigation period, as I realized that my marketing expertise provided tools for understanding and counteracting the manipulation that had allowed this situation to develop. The systematic approach to evidence gathering and analysis felt like reclaiming parts of my identity that had been gradually subsumed by the caretaker role that David had assigned me within his family system. The transformation from shocked discovery to strategic planning occurred gradually as I developed confidence in my ability to understand and address the complex emotional and financial challenges that David's deception had created. Each new piece of evidence and every successful investigative technique reinforced my growing belief that I possessed the knowledge and capability necessary to protect myself and plan for an independent future. The catalyst moment when I discovered the hidden budget document in David's desk had initiated a comprehensive investigation that would ultimately reveal not only the extent of his financial exploitation, but also my own strength and resourcefulness in responding to betrayal. The woman who had trusted completely was becoming someone who verified everything, and this transformation would prove essential for surviving what lay ahead. The transformation from investigator to strategic planner required implementing protective measures while maintaining the appearance of continued support for David's family. Armed with comprehensive knowledge of the financial exploitation, I began developing a sophisticated plan for independence that would shield me from the consequences of his actions while positioning me for success, regardless of how our marriage ultimately concluded. The foundation of my strategy involved establishing independent financial resources that David could not access or control. This required opening accounts at financial institutions where we had no existing relationships, using my work address for all correspondence to ensure complete separation from any joint financial arrangements. The process demanded careful coordination to avoid creating documentation that might appear on statements that David could review. My first priority was securing greater influence at work that would provide both increased income and professional credibility for future independence. The marketing expertise I had developed over years of building campaigns for others remained valuable, particularly given the increasing importance of digital strategy and brand positioning in the competitive Sacramento tech landscape. However, leveraging my skills for maximum career advancement required refocusing my professional energy that had been drained by household chaos since David's family moved in. The promotion opportunity emerged when our chief marketing officer announced her departure to join a San Francisco startup. The director of strategy position reporting directly to the CEO would represent a significant advancement and substantial salary increase that could accelerate my financial independence plans. The application process demanded comprehensive preparation and focused attention that was difficult to maintain within a home environment dominated by David's family's constant needs and interruptions. The most challenging aspect of this professional advancement push was explaining the need for late nights at the office and weekend preparation time to David while his family occupied our home. The explanation required careful balance between demonstrating appropriate career ambition without revealing my underlying motivation for financial independence. My approach emphasized the competitive nature of the opportunity and the increased compensation that would benefit our family, allowing David to believe this meant supporting his relatives while I intended it for securing my separate future. The interview preparation involved developing comprehensive marketing strategy proposals that would differentiate me from other candidates while demonstrating my understanding of emerging trends and revenue opportunities. These materials required concentrated work that was impossible to complete at home with constant interruptions from David's parents and sister. The solution involved creating a fictional client project that required extensive office time, providing legitimate reason for working extended hours away from home. The final interview presentation represented both professional opportunity and personal liberation, as my marketing expertise would be applied toward securing my own future independence, rather than supporting the financial needs of people who viewed me merely as a convenient funding source. The comprehensive strategy I presented to the executive team reflected my deepest professional capabilities that had been partially suppressed by the emotional drain of managing an exploitative home environment. The professional breakthrough came when the CEO called personally to offer me the chief marketing officer position rather than the director role I had applied for. The incumbent CMO had recommended me for her replacement based on my strategic vision and leadership capabilities demonstrated during the interview process. The promotion represented a 45% salary increase, executive-level equity compensation, and the professional recognition that validated my marketing expertise and business acumen. The income from this executive position was deposited into accounts that David had no knowledge of, creating the foundation for independent financial security. However, I maintained our existing joint accounts with the same regular contribution patterns to avoid arousing suspicion, while I continued gathering information and implementing my exit strategy. My investment approach leveraged the company's executive stock purchase program and aggressive retirement plan contributions that would maximize tax-advantaged savings while building substantial resources outside the community property that would be subject to division in divorce proceedings. The strategy emphasized growth-oriented investments appropriate for my age and risk tolerance, focusing on building security that could support complete independence when I was ready to leave the marriage. The psychological challenge of building independent wealth while living with someone who was systematically redirecting household resources to his family required extraordinary compartmentalization skills that separated my secret financial planning from daily interactions with David and his relatives. The emotional discipline necessary for maintaining normal relationships while preparing for separation was exhausting but essential for protecting my strategic position. Document security became crucial as my investigation and planning activities generated records that required protection from discovery while remaining accessible for my reference and future legal proceedings. The solution involved establishing a secure cloud storage system accessible only through my work computer and mobile device with dual-factor authentication that prevented unauthorized access. Physical documents were stored in a locked cabinet in my office at work, rather than at home where David or his family might discover them. Legal consultation expanded beyond initial information gathering to comprehensive divorce planning that would optimize outcomes regardless of when formal proceedings might be initiated. The attorneys emphasized that California's community property laws provided certain protections, but that optimal results would require strategic timing and thorough documentation of financial misconduct to address the unauthorized home equity line and ongoing financial support to David's family from marital assets. The legal strategy involved several components that needed coordination with my financial planning and professional development activities. Asset protection measures would shield resources that I was accumulating independently while ensuring that joint assets would be distributed equitably despite David's attempts to redirect them to his family. Documentation requirements would provide evidence of financial misconduct while establishing the pattern of family support that had drained our marital resources. The most complex aspect of legal preparation involved understanding how the home equity line of credit that David had established through forgery would affect the division of our primary asset. The attorneys recommended forensic financial analysis to establish the funds trail and demonstrate that these resources had been diverted to support his family, rather than improve our marital property or joint financial position. The business analysis revealed that approximately $42,000 had been withdrawn through the home equity line over 18 months, with funds flowing directly to David's parents' mortgage payments, his sister's tuition, and various family expenses including a vacation to Lake Tahoe that had been presented to me as fully funded by his parents, as a thank you for our support. The documentation provided compelling evidence of systematic financial deception that would strengthen my position in divorce proceedings. Professional networking became essential for building relationships that would support my transition to independence. The Sacramento marketing community was well connected, providing opportunities to establish professional relationships beyond my current employer that could provide future career options if relocation became necessary after divorce. Industry. Conferences and professional development events provided venues for building these connections while maintaining the appearance of normal career advancement activities. Tax planning considerations became increasingly important as my independent income grew and the complexity of my financial situation increased. David's financial activities had created tax implications that could affect my liability regardless of our marital status. Understanding these implications required consultation with tax specialists who could provide guidance for both current compliance and future planning after separation. The tax strategy involved legitimate methods for minimizing current obligations, while positioning myself for optimal treatment of any asset distributions that might result from divorce proceedings. The approach required careful documentation and compliance with regulations, while taking advantage of available deductions and credits that would preserve resources for future security. Insurance analysis revealed another area where my financial well-being was potentially compromised. Our health insurance, life insurance, and property coverage all needed review to ensure appropriate protection regardless of marital status. The insurance review led to establishing independent coverage where possible and documenting existing policies to ensure continuity of protection during any transition period. Emergency fund development became a priority as I recognized that crisis situations might require immediate access to substantial cash resources. The emergency fund needed to provide for several months of living expenses while supporting legal proceedings and transition costs that would be necessary for establishing a separate household. Building this fund required systematic saving from my increased income while maintaining normal contribution patterns to our joint accounts. The psychological preparation for eventual confrontation with David required developing communication, strategies, and emotional resilience that would enable effective negotiation under highly stressful conditions. The preparation included role-playing exercises and consultation with therapists who specialized in high-conflict divorce and financial exploitation within relationships. Professional counseling provided essential support for managing the emotional impact of David's betrayal while maintaining the strategic focus necessary for optimal preparation. The counseling process helped me understand the dynamics of financial exploitation within relationships, while building confidence in my ability to make independent decisions that prioritized my well-being after years of putting David's family's needs first. The most challenging aspect of the secret preparation phase was maintaining normal family relationships while building comprehensive independence. This became increasingly difficult as David's family settled more permanently into our home, with his mother rearranging my kitchen cabinets, his father establishing a permanent place in my home office, and his sister treating common areas as her personal space without consideration for my needs or preferences. The preparation phase concluded with the development of multiple contingency plans addressing different scenarios for how the situation might evolve. These plans included strategies for negotiated separation, contested divorce proceedings, response to financial retaliation, and protection of my professional reputation throughout the process. Each scenario required different tactical approaches while maintaining consistent strategic objectives for protecting my interests and securing my independent future. 4 months into my clandestine preparation phase, my executive position had evolved from new leadership role to recognized authority within Sacramento's tech marketing landscape. The acceleration of my professional growth occurred through a combination of strategic initiatives, innovative campaign development, and executive presence that positioned me as a respected leader in the regional business community. The catalyst for this acceleration was securing the Horizon Innovations account, a biotech startup with revolutionary medical testing technology that needed sophisticated marketing to attract both medical industry adoption and venture capital investment. The comprehensive campaign required developing messaging that could communicate complex technical capabilities to multiple audiences while building credibility in a skeptical healthcare environment dominated by established players. The intellectual demands of this assignment pushed my strategic capabilities beyond anything I had encountered previously, forcing me to develop new approaches for translating technical innovation into compelling market positioning that would resonate with both clinical practitioners and financial investors. The complexity demanded mastery of healthcare regulatory considerations, scientific communication principles, and investor psychology that represented significant expansion of my professional expertise. The technical knowledge acquisition required intensive study of medical testing protocols, healthcare industry dynamics, and regulatory approval processes that shaped market adoption of new diagnostic technologies. The learning curve was steep and demanding, requiring evening research sessions at the office that provided legitimate reason for extended hours away from home, without arousing David's suspicion about my true activities and objectives. David's response to my increased work schedule was a mixture of mild complaint about my reduced availability for his family's needs and appreciation for the additional income that he assumed would be available for supporting his parents and sister. The cognitive dissonance was striking. He simultaneously resented my absence while planning how to allocate my increased earnings to his family's benefit, never considering that my professional advancement might serve goals other than expanding the resources available for his relatives. The success of the Horizon campaign resulted in industry recognition through healthcare marketing awards and substantial client growth that established my reputation as an innovative strategic leader. The professional acknowledgement generated speaking invitations at industry conferences, requests for interviews with business publications, and networking opportunities with executives across Northern California's business community. These professional developments provided both increased income for my independence fund and expanded connections that would support career continuity, regardless of personal disruption from the inevitable confrontation with David. The network represented security beyond financial resources, relationships that would provide opportunities and support during the transition to independence. The most valuable professional relationship developed with Catherine Winters, CEO of Meridian Partners, a venture capital firm specializing in healthcare and biotech investments. Our connection began when Catherine witnessed my presentation at the Sacramento Business Innovation Forum and recognized the strategic insight that had helped Horizon secure its market position. The mentorship she offered provided both professional guidance and personal support from someone who had navigated her own divorce while maintaining executive responsibilities. Catherine's advice extended beyond career strategy to include practical wisdom about securing financial independence and maintaining professional focus during personal crisis. Her experience with high-conflict divorce provided perspective that helped me prepare for various scenarios that might emerge when David realized I was ending our marriage and withdrawing financial support from his family. The financial infrastructure supporting my independence was now sufficiently robust to sustain extended legal proceedings and lifestyle maintenance without accessing joint assets that might become temporarily inaccessible during divorce. My executive compensation package included quarterly bonuses and equity grants that provided both immediate liquidity and long-term wealth building entirely separate from marital assets that would be subject to division. The asset protection strategy I had implemented included establishing a revocable trust for managing my separate property while creating documentation that clearly distinguished between marital assets and my independent resources. The structure provided legal separation between community property and my post-separation earnings, while creating frameworks for eventual property division that would recognize David's financial exploitation through the home equity line and systematic support of his family from marital resources. Real estate planning involved researching housing options that would provide appropriate accommodations after separation while remaining within reasonable distance of my office. The property analysis focused on condominium developments with security features and professional management that would simplify the transition to single living after years in a single-family home, increasingly occupied by David's relatives. The timing strategy for confrontation with David required balancing multiple considerations, including financial readiness, legal preparation, professional stability, and emotional resilience. The optimal window emerged as my one-year anniversary in the executive position approached, providing performance history that would strengthen my professional standing while completing the financial preparation necessary for independence. Our psychological readiness for confrontation developed through continued therapy focused on rebuilding self-trust after years of manipulation and establishing healthy boundaries that had been systematically undermined throughout my marriage. The counseling provided frameworks for understanding how emotional exploitation had facilitated financial abuse and strategies for maintaining clarity during the high-stress conversations that would accompany separation. The final preparation component involved documenting the home environment since his family's arrival through a detailed journal that recorded financial demands, household disruptions, and inappropriate behaviors that demonstrated their disregard for my space and resources. This record would provide supporting evidence for both legal proceedings and personal validation during moments when self-doubt might emerge about my decision to end the marriage. The confrontation strategy emphasized calm assertion of boundaries, rather than emotional accusations, focusing on the factual reality of financial exploitation rather than engaging in battles over intentions or family loyalty. The approach recognized that David and his family would likely attempt to position me as selfish and materialistic for withdrawing support, and prepared counter-narratives grounded in principles of mutual respect and financial partnership that had been violated through their actions. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. As my secret preparation phase approached its conclusion, the implementation of my exit strategy required extraordinary precision in timing and execution. The complexity of managing my executive responsibilities while simultaneously positioning myself for marital separation demanded sophisticated project management skills and unwavering emotional discipline that tested every aspect of my professional and personal capabilities. The sequence began with securing new housing, a critical step that needed completion before any confrontation. The condominium I selected offered proximity to my office, 24-hour security, and a private entrance that would provide both convenience and safety during the potentially volatile transition period. The purchase was structured through my independent resources, with closing documents sent to my office address and all communications handled through my private email and phone. Furniture and household essentials were gradually purchased and stored at a secured facility, creating a ready inventory that would allow immediate establishment of a comfortable living environment without the delays of shopping during an emotionally draining transition. The acquisition strategy focused on quality basics that would provide comfort and functionality while representing a fresh aesthetic completely different from the home I had shared with David. Digital security became increasingly important as confrontation approached. New accounts were established with different passwords, two-factor authentication was implemented on all sensitive information, and important documents were transferred to secure cloud storage accessible only through my protected devices. Financial accounts were systematically secured with updated security questions and contact information that David could not access or manipulate. The legal framework was finalized with divorce papers prepared but not yet filed, providing the option for immediate legal action if necessary, while leaving room for negotiated separation if David proved willing to engage reasonably. My attorney had prepared documentation addressing the unauthorized home equity line, the systematic financial support of his family from marital assets, and the implications of these actions for appropriate property division and potential spousal support. Professional stability was reinforced through careful communication with key executives at my company, providing general awareness of potential personal changes without specific details that might prematurely reach David through our overlapping social circles. The approach emphasized my continued commitment to organizational success while requesting flexibility for legal appointments that might be necessary in coming months. The trigger point for implementation came more dramatically than I had anticipated, through the ATM comment that revealed with perfect clarity how David and his family viewed me. The moment provided both emotional confirmation of my decision and tactical advantage. Their casual dismissal of my humanity in private conversation offered powerful evidence of their true perspective that would be difficult for David to explain, weigh, or reframe during confrontation. The implementation began the morning after overhearing their conversation, with a carefully orchestrated sequence designed to establish my position from strength rather than reactive emotion. Rather than confronting David immediately about the overheard conversation, I left for work earlier than usual, contacted my attorney to initiate the divorce filing, transferred my remaining personal items to the storage facility during lunch, and arranged for a locksmith to meet me at the condominium that evening to ensure all security measures were functioning properly. The financial execution included transferring my direct deposit to my independent account, effective immediately, removing my name as authorized user on credit accounts that David managed, and notifying credit bureaus of the pending marital separation to protect against new accounts being opened in my name. The systematic financial separation had been prepared months in advance, requiring only final activation steps that could be completed within hours. The confrontation itself was scheduled for the following evening, allowing me one night in my new residence to center myself emotionally and ensure all logistical elements were in place. The timing was strategic. Friday evening provided weekend buffer for initial reactions to settle before Monday. Professional responsibilities resumed, while giving David's family limited business day access to banks or attorneys who might help them respond to the sudden termination of financial support. The conversation was planned for a public restaurant rather than our home, providing both neutral territory and natural constraints on emotional outbursts or manipulation tactics that might be employed in private. The location also eliminated the possibility of being outnumbered by David's family members who might attempt to intervene or apply additional emotional pressure during this critical conversation. The emotional preparation included a morning therapy session, meditation practice, and review of key documentation that reinforced the factual basis for my decision beyond the triggering ATM comment. This preparation proved essential when facing David across the restaurant table, his expression shifting from confusion to shock, as I calmly informed him that divorce papers had been filed that morning and I had established separate residence. His initial response followed the predictable pattern of minimizing the ATM comment as a misunderstood joke while emphasizing family loyalty and obligation. When this approach failed to generate the expected guilt response, his tactics shifted to financial threats about my responsibility for his family's well-being and potential damage to my professional reputation if our divorce became contentious. The conversation reached its critical turning point when I placed the home equity line documentation on the table, pointing out the forged signature and systematic withdrawal of funds for his family's expenses without my knowledge or consent. His expression transformed from righteous indignation to visible panic as he realized that his financial manipulation had been thoroughly documented and could have legal consequences beyond the divorce proceedings. The conditional offer I presented provided a pathway to amicable resolution. I would not pursue criminal charges for the forgery if he agreed to an equitable division of marital assets, immediate removal of his family from our home, and efficient completion of divorce proceedings. Without attempts to claim ongoing support, the framework acknowledged the reality of his misconduct while offering reasonable terms that would allow both of us to move forward independently. David's expression shifted between disbelief, anger, and calculation as he processed the comprehensive nature of my preparation and the irrefutable evidence of his financial misconduct. His silence stretched for nearly a full minute before he attempted to reframe the situation as a temporary disagreement that could be resolved through counseling and better communication. "We can work through this," he insisted, his voice lowered, to avoid attention from nearby diners. "Every marriage has rough patches." The disconnect between his characterization of systematic financial exploitation as a rough patch and the reality of his actions reinforced the necessity of my decision. His inability to acknowledge the fundamental breach of trust, even when confronted with documentary evidence, demonstrated the futility of further discussion or negotiation about continuing the marriage. When his attempts at reconciliation failed to generate the desired response, David's approach shifted to financial intimidation. "You'll never get the house," he claimed, apparently unaware that my financial planning had already accounted for potential loss of the home equity that his unauthorized borrowing had substantially reduced. "My family needs that stability right now, and no judge would force them out." The legal preparation provided confidence to counter these claims calmly, explaining that his unauthorized equity line and documented financial exploitation created compelling evidence for equitable distribution that would likely favor my position. The home had become a secondary consideration in my planning, a marital asset whose emotional significance had been destroyed by the invasion of his family, and whose financial value had been compromised by his borrowing against it without my knowledge. David's final emotional leverage attempt focused on the 8 years we had built together and the dreams we had once shared. "I thought we were planning a family," he said, referencing discussions about children that had been repeatedly postponed due to his family's financial needs. "I thought we were building something permanent." This manipulation tactic proved least effective of all, as it highlighted how thoroughly our shared goals had been subordinated to his family's demands. The family planning discussions that had once seemed sincere were revealed as empty promises, perpetually delayed while resources that could have secured our future were redirected to support his parents and sister. The conversation concluded with practical arrangements rather than emotional resolution. David requested a week to find alternative housing for his family, which I accepted with specific conditions, including no additional charges to joint accounts, no removal of household items beyond personal belongings, and daily video verification that the property was being maintained appropriately. These boundaries were documented in writing before I departed the restaurant, leaving David with the reality of his changed circumstances. The week that followed brought expected challenges as David and his family processed the sudden termination of their financial support system. His mother attempted direct contact through increasingly desperate voicemails that evolved from indignation, "After all we've done for you," to bargaining, "We can be more considerate of your space," to thinly veiled threats about family loyalty. His sister sent lengthy text messages positioning herself as an innocent bystander, caught between warring parties, rather than an active participant in the systematic exploitation of my resources. The most surprising communication came from David's father, a handwritten letter delivered to my office that contained an awkward but seemingly sincere apology for his role in the situation. "I knew it wasn't right," he wrote, "but it was easier to accept help than to stand up to my wife and son." The acknowledgement provided unexpected validation of my perspective, while suggesting that at least one family member recognized the inappropriate nature of their dependence. My professional responsibilities provided welcome focus during this emotionally turbulent period. The Horizon campaign entered its second phase with expansion into European markets, demanding strategic adaptation for different healthcare systems and regulatory environments. The work required intense concentration that prevented dwelling on the personal disruption occurring in parallel with these professional challenges. Catherine's mentorship proved invaluable during this period, offering both practical advice about maintaining professional performance during personal crisis and emotional support from someone who understood the complex dynamics of extracting oneself from an exploitative relationship. Her guidance helped me navigate the inevitable moments of doubt and second-guessing that emerged, despite months of careful preparation and absolute certainty about the necessity of my actions. The separation of personal and professional spheres became increasingly important as divorce proceedings began. My executive position required frequent public appearances and industry networking that demanded emotional composure and focused attention, regardless of developments in the legal process. The compartmentalization skills developed during my secret preparation phase served me well in maintaining this separation between public professional persona and private personal challenges. The property division negotiations proceeded more efficiently than anticipated, largely due to the comprehensive documentation of David's financial misconduct that created significant leverage for my attorney. The unauthorized home equity line and documented support of his family from marital assets established patterns that would be difficult to defend in court, motivating David toward reasonable settlement terms rather than protracted litigation that would further expose his actions. The final agreement included selling the house with equitable division of remaining equity, recognition of my separate property established during our separation, and clear termination of any financial obligations between us. The settlement acknowledged the reality that David's family had already received substantial financial benefit from our marital resources, effectively receiving their portion of asset division in advance through years of systematic support. The most challenging aspect of the divorce process was managing my emotional response to the dissolution of an 8-year relationship and the dreams it had once represented. Despite the clear necessity of separation and the documented exploitation that had occurred, the finality of legal proceedings triggered grief for the partnership I had believed we were building and the future I had once envisioned with David before his family's needs had consumed our resources and relationship. Therapy provided essential support for processing this grief while maintaining clarity about the factual reality of the situation. The counseling focused on distinguishing between mourning the end of the relationship I had believed existed and recognizing that the actual dynamics had been fundamentally different from that perception. This distinction helped separate appropriate grief from self-doubt about the necessity and timing of my decision. The 12 months following the divorce finalization brought transformation that extended far beyond legal separation from David and financial disentanglement from his family. This period of reclamation and growth challenged me to redefine my identity, professional trajectory, and personal priorities while establishing new patterns that reflected my values rather than responding to external demands and manipulative expectations. My executive role expanded to include international marketing oversight as our company established European operations following the successful Horizon campaign. The promotion came with substantial compensation increases, expanded equity grants, and leadership responsibilities that would have been impossible to manage while navigating the chaos of life with David's family. The professional growth reflected both market recognition of my capabilities and internal capacity, liberated from the constant drain of managing an exploitative home environment. The international responsibilities included quarterly travel to London and Brussels, establishing market presence in regions with different healthcare systems and regulatory frameworks. These trips provided not just professional development, but also psychological distance from the emotional aftermath of divorce, offering fresh perspectives and cultural experiences entirely separate from my former life with David. My condominium transformed from transitional housing to true home through thoughtful design choices and personalization that reflected my aesthetic preferences without compromise or negotiation. The space was arranged to support both professional productivity and personal rejuvenation, with a dedicated home office that replaced the dining room table workspace I had been forced to use when David's sister occupied my office in our previous home. The psychological work of recovery focused on recognizing and countering the patterns of manipulation that had allowed financial exploitation to develop gradually over years. Therapy helped identify how David had systematically positioned normal boundaries as selfishness and reasonable financial prudence as materialism, creating false dichotomies between family loyalty and appropriate self-protection that served his agenda of redirecting resources to his relatives. The most valuable insight emerged through examining how my professional strength in understanding persuasive messaging had been neutralized in personal contexts where emotional manipulation leveraged my values of generosity and family support. This awareness developed into heightened sensitivity to disconnects between stated intentions and actual behaviors, strengthening my ability to identify manipulation attempts in both personal and professional relationships. Financial rebuilding progressed more rapidly than anticipated, as freedom from supporting David's family allowed systematic investment and asset accumulation previously impossible under the constant drain of their needs. The discipline that had characterized my secret preparation phase continued in this new chapter, creating accelerated progress toward long-term security and wealth building that reflected my independent priorities. The investment strategy emphasized diversification across retirement accounts, market investments, and real estate holdings that would provide both immediate tax advantages and long-term growth potential. The approach maintained appropriate risk levels while creating multiple income streams that would eventually provide flexibility for potential career changes or early retirement options not previously considered possible. Professional networking expanded beyond immediate career requirements to include board positions with nonprofit organizations focused on financial literacy for women and support services for those navigating divorce after financial exploitation. These volunteer roles provided opportunities to transform my personal experience into community benefit, while building relationships outside the technology industry that enriched both my perspective and support system. Dating emerged as an unexpected challenge approximately 8 months after the divorce finalization. The first tentative steps into new relationships revealed both opportunity for genuine partnership and heightened sensitivity to potential manipulation that sometimes created excessive caution in normal relationship development. Finding the balance between appropriate boundaries and unnecessary guardedness required conscious effort and ongoing reflection about distinguishing between David's exploitative patterns and healthy relationship dynamics. The most significant relationship developed with James, a software engineering director whose self-sufficiency and emotional maturity provided stark contrast to David's dependency and manipulation. Our connection evolved gradually through shared interests in hiking and international travel, with explicit conversations about financial values and family boundaries that would have been impossible in my previous relationship, where questioning support for David's family was positioned as character deficiency. James's relationship with his own family demonstrated healthy interdependence and appropriate boundaries, with mutual support that flowed in multiple directions rather than constant, one-way provision of resources. The example helped recalibrate my understanding of normal family dynamics, while validating my growing recognition that David's expectations had been fundamentally exploitative rather than representing universal family obligations. The psychological freedom from constantly managing David's emotions and his family's needs created space for personal exploration beyond career advancement. Creative interests that had been set aside during marriage due to time constraints and emotional exhaustion re-emerged as meaningful aspects of identity. Photography, particularly landscape work during hiking trips, developed from occasional hobby to serious artistic practice with local gallery representation that provided both creative satisfaction and supplemental income. Communication from David decreased steadily following property settlement, with occasional emails about administrative details of separation giving way to complete silence as he presumably established new patterns and relationships. His family maintained sporadic contact attempts during the early months after separation, primarily focused on financial appeals disguised as relationship repair. But these too faded as my non-response made clear that financial support had permanently ended. Unexpected closure came through chance encounter with David's sister Melissa at a local coffee shop approximately 10 months after the divorce. The brief, awkward conversation revealed that their parents had moved to Arizona to live with an aunt, while David had taken a teaching position in Southern California. The geographic dispersal of the once tightly bound family unit suggested that without my resources to sustain their collective lifestyle, the family system had required fundamental restructuring. Melissa's sheepish demeanor and inability to maintain eye contact throughout our brief interaction suggested some recognition of her role in the exploitation that had characterized my relationship with their family. Her parting comment, "I should have said something about how they treated you," offered small validation without accepting personal responsibility for her own participation in the systematic draining of my resources. The 2-year anniversary of my separation from David arrived with a professional milestone that symbolized how completely my life had transformed since overhearing those 3 devastating words in our hallway. Meridian Partners, the venture capital firm led by my mentor Catherine Winters, approached me with an opportunity to join their team as chief marketing partner, leading brand strategy for their entire portfolio of healthcare and biotech investments. The position represented both professional recognition of my expertise and financial opportunity through equity participation in emerging companies that would extend far beyond traditional executive compensation. The decision process involved comprehensive evaluation of career trajectory, financial implications, and personal fulfillment potential that would have been impossible during my marriage when David's family needs dominated every major life choice. The deliberation focused entirely on my professional development and financial security, without consideration of how others might exploit increased resources or manipulate decisions to serve their interests. This autonomous decision-making represented perhaps the most profound transformation since separating from the constant obligation to consider David's family in every choice. Catherine's mentorship evolved from professional guidance to genuine friendship during this transition, providing valuable perspective from someone who had navigated similar career pivots and relationship challenges. Her insights helped distinguish between opportunities that offered genuine growth potential and those that merely represented status advancement without substantive development of capabilities or meaningful impact. This discernment had been largely absent during my marriage when financial pressure to support David's family often pushed me toward highest-paying options, regardless of growth potential or personal satisfaction. The venture capital environment provided intellectual stimulation beyond anything my corporate role could offer, with exposure to cutting-edge medical technologies and innovative healthcare delivery models that were reshaping patient care across multiple therapeutic areas. Each portfolio company presented unique marketing challenges, from explaining complex genetic testing protocols to healthcare providers to communicating value propositions for reimbursement negotiations with insurance companies. The variety demanded continuous learning and strategic flexibility that stretched my capabilities in ways that created both professional growth and personal satisfaction. Financial transformation accelerated through the equity participation structure that characterized venture capital compensation models. Beyond substantial base salary, the position included ownership percentages in portfolio companies that could generate significant returns as these enterprises matured and either went public or were acquired by larger organizations. This wealth-building potential created financial security that would have seemed impossible during the years when David's family systematically drained resources that should have been building our future. The most unexpected aspect of this professional transition was discovering leadership capabilities that had been suppressed during my marriage, when maintaining harmony with David and his family required constant accommodation and conflict avoidance. The venture capital role demanded direct feedback, decisive judgment, and confident direction that would have triggered accusations of selfishness or materialism in my previous relationship. The freedom to exercise these natural leadership tendencies without emotional manipulation created professional advancement while simultaneously healing psychological damage from years of having my capabilities undermined through guilt and obligation. How? Relationship with James developed alongside this professional evolution, providing personal partnership characterized by mutual support rather than one-sided provision of resources. Our connection matured into genuine collaboration, where each person's needs and goals received equal consideration in decision-making, creating stark contrast to the hierarchy of priorities in my marriage, where David's family consistently ranked above our partnership or my individual well-being. The balance extended to financial matters, with transparent discussions about resources and expenses that respected separate assets while planning shared experiences. The healthy interdependence with James highlighted how comprehensively David's manipulation had distorted my understanding of normal relationship dynamics. Simple acts like James insisting on paying his share of vacation expenses or declining financial help with his condo renovation initially triggered irrational anxiety about relationship stability, as David had positioned financial boundaries as evidence of insufficient commitment or affection. Recognizing these distorted perspectives represented crucial emotional healing that allowed genuine partnership to develop, without the exploitation that had characterized my marriage. Weekend hiking excursions with James became opportunities for both relationship building and continued development of my photography practice. The landscapes of Northern California provided spectacular subjects from coastal formations to mountain vistas, while the physical activity and natural settings offered rejuvenation from intense work responsibilities. These experiences represented reclamation of personal interests that had been gradually abandoned during marriage, as David's family needs consumed available time, energy, and resources. My living space evolved alongside these personal and professional developments, with the condominium eventually sold in favor of a hillside home, with expansive views and dedicated studio space for photography work. The property represented not just a residence, but physical manifestation of independence and self-determination, with design choices and spatial arrangements that reflected my preferences without compromise or justification. The home office overlooked a Japanese-inspired garden that provided visual respite during intense work periods, while the open kitchen and entertainment spaces facilitated gatherings with new friends and colleagues who shared my current interests. and values. Financial security progressed from immediate independence to long-term wealth building as investment strategies matured and professional compensation increased. The freedom from supporting David's family allowed systematic allocation of resources toward retirement funds, market investments, and real estate holdings that created multiple streams of passive income. This financial infrastructure provided not just material security, but psychological freedom from the scarcity mindset that had dominated decision-making when David's family continuously drained available resources. Communication regarding the transformation I had experienced emerged through occasional professional interviews following successful venture funding for portfolio companies. These media opportunities initially focused exclusively on marketing strategy and healthcare innovation, but gradually included questions about leadership philosophy and career development that allowed thoughtful sharing of insights gained through personal experience. Without naming David or directly discussing the divorce, I could articulate how boundary setting and value alignment created professional advancement opportunities that might otherwise be compromised by competing priorities or resource depletion. The professional guidance I began offering to women in similar circumstances evolved from informal mentoring into structured programs through nonprofit board service with organizations focused on financial empowerment after relationship exploitation. These sessions provided frameworks for recognizing manipulation tactics, establishing appropriate boundaries, and rebuilding financial security that reflected my journey while respecting each woman's unique circumstances. The volunteer work offered meaningful purpose beyond career advancement, transforming painful personal experience into community benefit that helped others avoid similar situations or navigate them more effectively. The most profound psychological shift occurred in recognizing that the ATM comment overheard in our hallway, while painful in the moment, had ultimately provided the catalyst for liberation from an exploitative situation that might otherwise have continued indefinitely. The explicit articulation of how David and his mother truly viewed me had shattered illusions about family loyalty and mutual support that had sustained the one-sided arrangement despite mounting evidence of exploitation. Without that moment of unfiltered truth, the manipulation might have continued through increasingly sophisticated emotional tactics that leveraged my values against my well-being. The woman who had stood frozen in that hallway, hearing herself reduced to a financial resource rather than a human being with legitimate needs and boundaries, had undergone comprehensive transformation across every dimension of her existence. Professional achievement, financial security, and personal relationships now reflected authentic values and priorities rather than responding to exploitation disguised as family obligation. The journey from that moment of painful clarity to genuine independence demonstrated how completely life could be reconstructed when manipulation was replaced by self-determination and false obligations were exchanged for authentic connection. 3. Years after that pivotal moment in the hallway, my life had transformed so completely that the woman who had silently absorbed the ATM label seemed like a distant acquaintance rather than my former self. The professional trajectory that began with the CMO position and accelerated through the venture capital partnership had created both financial abundance and industry influence that extended far beyond Sacramento's regional business community to national healthcare innovation circles. The unexpected opportunity to deliver the keynote address at the National Healthcare Innovation Summit represented formal recognition of my expertise in bringing transformative medical technologies to market. Standing on that San Francisco stage before 2,000 industry leaders, I shared insights about communicating complex scientific advancements to multiple stakeholders with competing priorities: patients seeking hope, clinicians requiring evidence, insurers demanding value metrics, and investors expecting returns. The presentation drew from experiences with multiple portfolio companies while offering frameworks applicable across healthcare sectors. What the audience couldn't see behind my polished delivery and strategic insights was how completely impossible This achievement would have been had I remained in a relationship where any professional advancement was immediately converted into resource extraction for David's family. The mental clarity and emotional energy required for innovative thinking at this level had been unavailable when constant guilt manipulation and financial demands created perpetual crisis management rather than strategic focus. The standing ovation following my presentation provided external validation of expertise that complemented the internal confidence developed through successful navigation of both professional challenges and personal transformation. The professional recognition represented not just acknowledgement of marketing capabilities, but affirmation of the comprehensive personal rebuilding that had created space for these capabilities to flourish without constraint or exploitation. The summit organizer's invitation to develop my presentation into a book represented unexpected career expansion beyond direct client work into thought leadership that could influence broader industry practices. The writing process required dedicated time and focus that would have been impossible in my previous home environment, dominated by David's family's constant needs and interruptions. The manuscript development became weekend project with James providing thoughtful feedback and encouragement throughout the process, demonstrating how genuine partnership supported growth rather than depleting resources. The resulting book, Translating Innovation, Communicating Healthcare Breakthroughs Across Stakeholder Ecosystems, was published by a respected business press with distribution throughout healthcare industry and academic medical centers. The publication established intellectual property beyond my client work, creating passive income and speaking opportunities that further diversified professional activities and compensation sources. This expansion represented prosperity development, rather than merely replacing resources continuously drained by David's family obligations. Financial security evolved into comprehensive wealth management as investment returns, equity positions, and intellectual property created multidimensional income streams requiring sophisticated planning and protection strategies. The financial advisory team assembled to manage these resources included tax specialists, estate planning attorneys, and investment managers with expertise in healthcare innovation sectors, where my industry knowledge provided additional insight. 4. Strategic allocation decisions. The investment portfolio expanded beyond traditional market positions to include angel funding for women-led healthcare startups, creating both potential returns and opportunities to mentor female entrepreneurs. Navigating complex funding environments. This direct investment activity leveraged both financial resources and professional expertise to support innovation while addressing gender disparities in healthcare venture funding that limited development of solutions for women's health conditions. James's integration into my life progressed from dating relationship to life partnership, with thoughtful consideration of legal and financial frameworks that would protect both individuals' autonomy while facilitating shared experiences and mutual support. The relationship structure emphasized transparent communication about resources and responsibilities without the obligation hierarchies that had characterized my marriage, where David's family consistently received priority over our partnership needs. Our commitment ceremony reflected this balanced approach, with intimate gathering at my hillside home rather than elaborate event that would prioritize others' expectations over our preferences. The celebration focused on authentic connection with chosen family of close friends and respected colleagues, rather than fulfilling social obligations or managing family dynamics. The conscious decision to create ceremony reflecting our values, rather than external pressures, represented significant healing from relationship patterns, where my preferences were routinely subordinated to others' demands. The legal framework supporting our partnership included carefully structured agreements that protected individual assets while establishing parameters for shared resources and mutual support. These documents reflected lessons from previous experience while creating foundation for genuine partnership rather than exploitation. The transparent development process contrasted sharply with David's secretive financial activities that had undermined our marriage through unauthorized borrowing and systematic redirection of resources to his family. Home expansion accommodated James's music studio alongside my photography space, creating dedicated areas for individual interests while maintaining shared living environments that supported both privacy and connection. The property improvements included sustainable features reflecting environmental values, with solar installation and water conservation systems that aligned with our hiking experiences in natural landscapes increasingly threatened by climate impacts. These modifications represented values-based decisions rather than status considerations that had often influenced David's preferences. Professional collaboration emerged organically as James's software engineering expertise complemented my healthcare, marketing background, creating opportunities to develop digital platforms for patient education about complex medical technologies. These joint projects provided shared intellectual engagement while maintaining appropriate boundaries between individual career paths. The collaboration demonstrated healthy interdependence rather than the resource extraction that had characterized my relationship with David and his family. The contrast between healthy partnership and exploitative relationship became increasingly clear through experiences that would have been impossible during my marriage. Vacation planning now involved mutual consideration of preferences and equitable financial participation rather than cancellation due to David's family emergencies or resentment when trips proceeded without his family's inclusion. Career decisions were made based on professional development and personal fulfillment rather than maximum income generation to support ever-expanding family needs. Daily life reflected shared responsibilities rather than expectation that I would manage household operations while simultaneously funding David's family obligations. Emotional healing progressed through recognition that the exploitation I had experienced wasn't result of personal deficiency, but sophisticated manipulation, leveraging positive values of generosity and family support. Therapy helped identify how these admirable qualities had been weaponized to create compliance with increasingly unreasonable demands, with any resistance framed as character failure rather than appropriate boundary setting. This understanding allowed maintaining genuine generosity while developing discernment about situations where giving supports growth versus enabling dysfunction. The nonprofit board service expanded to include leadership positions with organizations, supporting women rebuilding financial independence after relationship exploitation. This work provided community impact beyond individual career success, transforming painful personal experience into resources that helped others navigate similar challenges. The volunteer commitment included developing educational programs about financial manipulation tactics and protection strategies, creating scalable impact beyond direct client services. Unexpected reconnection with David occurred at healthcare industry conference, where his new position with medical education technology company created professional overlap neither of us had anticipated. The brief, awkward interaction revealed a man who appeared significantly older than his actual age, with stress markers visible in posture and expression that suggested continued struggles despite his apparent career advancement. His attempt at casual conversation about industry trends barely masked discomfort that reflected awareness of how completely I had transformed since our separation. The emotional neutrality I maintained throughout this encounter represented significant healing, from both the anger immediately following discovery of his deception and the grief during divorce proceedings. The person standing before me seemed neither enemy nor lost partner, but simply former connection whose choices had created natural consequences he was still navigating. His subtle references to family challenges suggested continuing entanglement in dynamics that had destroyed our marriage, while my freedom from those patterns had created unprecedented professional success and personal fulfillment. This chance meeting provided unexpected closure, confirming that the path chosen after overhearing that devastating ATM label had created possibilities that would have remained permanently unavailable had I continued accepting exploitation disguised as family obligation. The woman who had stood silently in that hallway, absorbing casual dismissal of her humanity, had transformed completely, not through dramatic confrontation or vindictive action, but through systematic reclamation of resources, boundaries, and personal agency that created authentic prosperity in every dimension of life. 5 years after that transformative moment in the hallway, life had evolved beyond mere recovery from exploitation into genuine thriving across multiple dimensions. The professional foundation built through venture capital partnership had created opportunities beyond traditional career advancement, with board positions at emerging biotech companies complementing my portfolio management responsibilities at Meridian Partners. These governance roles provided strategic influence in organizations developing breakthrough therapies for previously untreatable conditions, creating meaningful impact beyond financial returns. The most significant professional evolution came through establishment of the Women in Healthcare Innovation Foundation, an organization I founded with Catherine's mentorship and initial funding from successful portfolio exits. The foundation addressed systemic barriers preventing women from receiving equitable venture funding for healthcare startups, particularly those focused on conditions primarily affecting female patients. The initiative combined investment capital, mentorship programs, and industry networking to create pathways for women entrepreneurs whose innovations might otherwise remain undeveloped due to persistent gender bias in healthcare funding. The foundation's first major success came through supporting Dr. Elena Vasquez's endometriosis diagnostic platform, a technology that reduced diagnosis time from the typical 7-10 years to less than 3 months through advanced biomarker identification. The company secured Series B funding from major healthcare investors after our initial support helped develop the prototype and validation studies, creating both financial return for the foundation and life-changing impact for millions of women suffering from this debilitating condition. This venture exemplified the foundation's mission of generating both social impact and financial sustainability through strategic investment in overlooked opportunities. The organization's rapid growth necessitated establishment of permanent headquarters in Sacramento's revitalized downtown district, with office space designed specifically to facilitate collaboration between entrepreneurs, clinical advisors, and investment professionals. The location decision reflected commitment to building innovation ecosystem outside traditional biotech hubs, while creating economic development in the community where my own professional journey had begun. The foundation's presence attracted additional healthcare startups to the area, creating cluster effect that generated jobs and investment beyond our direct activities. Leadership of this organization required delegation of some venture capital responsibilities, creating more balanced professional portfolio that included both direct investment activities and ecosystem development. This evolution represented significant growth from the career-focused executive who had needed to prove financial independence after leaving David. The woman who had once measured success primarily through income generation and title advancement now found deeper fulfillment in creating pathways for others while maintaining personal prosperity. Public recognition of these contributions came through inclusion in national business publications' lists of healthcare innovators and regional economic development leaders. These acknowledgments created platforms for discussing barriers facing women in healthcare entrepreneurship while highlighting successful models for addressing these challenges. The visibility generated additional funding opportunities for the foundation while establishing thought leadership that influenced investment patterns beyond our direct activities. Speaking engagements at medical innovation conferences, business schools, and economic development forums provided opportunities to share insights about both healthcare market dynamics and personal transformation following financial exploitation. Without directly discussing David or his family, I could articulate how freedom from resource depletion creates capacity for innovation and impact that benefits broader communities. These presentations connected personal experience with systemic issues, while offering practical frameworks for both boundary setting and opportunity creation. The book published following the Healthcare Innovation Summit became standard reading, in healthcare MBA programs and biotech management training, with second edition released incorporating case studies from foundation-supported companies. This intellectual contribution extended professional impact beyond direct investment activities, influencing how future healthcare leaders approached communication challenges across increasingly complex stakeholder ecosystems. The royalty income, while modest compared to investment returns, represented intellectual property development that created additional financial diversification. James and I established Philanthropic Foundation, focusing on environmental conservation and arts education, reflecting shared values and commitment to community contribution beyond professional success. The foundation supported preservation of wilderness areas where we had developed our relationship through hiking experiences, while creating arts programs in underserved schools that integrated environmental awareness with creative expression. These initiatives represented values-based deployment of resources rather than status-seeking or obligation fulfillment that had characterized financial decisions during my marriage. Our partnership evolved through complementary personal growth, rather than codependent patterns or resource extraction. James completed executive MBA program while maintaining software engineering leadership role, creating career advancement that paralleled my own professional development. Our relationship demonstrated how mutual support for individual goals strengthens partnership bonds rather than creating competition or resentment. This healthy interdependence contrasted sharply with my marriage, where any personal advancement immediately triggered increased financial demands from David's family. The Hillside home expanded to include guest cottage accommodating visiting entrepreneurs participating in foundation residency programs. The property modifications reflected integration of professional mission with personal space, while maintaining appropriate boundaries between work activities and private life. The design incorporated sustainability features, reducing environmental impact while creating showcase for renewable technologies that aligned with our conservation values. These improvements represented thoughtful investment rather than status display that had often motivated David's spending preferences. Financial security evolved into comprehensive legacy planning, encompassing philanthropy, family support, and community development. The wealth management strategy balanced current lifestyle, foundation funding, and long-term impact through structures designed to extend positive influence beyond my lifetime. This approach reflected fundamental shift from crisis management necessitated by David's family's constant financial emergencies to strategic deployment of resources aligned with core values and meaningful objectives. Therapy transitioned from healing past wounds to optimizing future possibilities, with focus on leadership development and relationship enhancement rather than trauma recovery. The psychological work addressed patterns established during years of manipulation that occasionally emerged in high-stress situations, providing tools for maintaining healthy boundaries without defensive overreaction based on past experiences. This evolution represented significant healing from the emotional damage inflicted through years of financial exploitation and guilt manipulation. The most unexpected development came through an article in Sacramento Business Journal profiling the foundation's impact on regional economic development. The piece included interview with entrepreneur who credited our mentorship program with saving her medical device company after traditional investors rejected her female-focused technology. The profile caught attention of David's sister Melissa, who sent email expressing both congratulations and seemingly genuine reflection on her role in the family dynamics that had characterized our marriage. Her message acknowledged witnessing the financial exploitation without intervening, explaining that family patterns established long before my arrival had normalized one-sided resource extraction disguised as mutual support. We were raised to believe that family meant access to whatever resources anyone had, she wrote, without ever considering reciprocity or boundaries as part of healthy relationships. The perspective suggested some personal growth in the years since our last awkward coffee shop encounter, though stopped short of direct apology for her active participation in the exploitation. The unexpected communication created opportunity for closure, without reopening wounds or reestablishing contact with David or his parents. My brief, courteous response acknowledged her message while maintaining firm boundaries about future communication, providing neither encouragement for continued connection nor harsh rejection that might trigger victim identity. The exchange demonstrated how completely emotional neutrality had replaced both anger and grief that had characterized earlier phases of recovery from the marriage. Professional achievements, financial security, and personal fulfillment had transformed the narrative completely from victim of exploitation to architect of innovation ecosystem, benefiting countless women through both investment opportunities and healthcare advancements. The foundation's growing impact created legacy extending far beyond individual career success or personal wealth accumulation, representing purpose-driven deployment of capabilities that might have remained constrained in continued relationship with David and his family. The contrast between current reality and alternate timeline, where I had never overheard that caustic ATM comment, occasionally emerged during quiet moments of reflection. The painful catalyst that had crystallized awareness of exploitation ultimately created possibility for transformation that extended beyond personal circumstances to systemic change for women in healthcare innovation. The journey from that moment of dehumanization to creation of opportunities for others demonstrated how completely liberation from exploitative relationships can unlock potential for both individual fulfillment and community impact. 7 years beyond that defining hallway moment, the transformation had created ripple effects extending far beyond my personal circumstances to influence healthcare innovation, investment patterns, and support systems for women recovering from financial exploitation. The Foundation's work had expanded from Sacramento headquarters to regional offices in Boston, Austin, and Minneapolis, creating national networks supporting women entrepreneurs, developing solutions for underserved medical needs across diverse patient populations. The organization's impact metrics revealed substantial progress towards systemic change, with portfolio companies securing over $300 million in follow-on funding from traditional venture capital firms that had initially rejected their proposals. These investments created breakthrough treatments for conditions ranging from maternal health complications to autoimmune disorders disproportionately affecting women, generating both patient benefit and market returns that challenged conventional wisdom about niche opportunities in women's health innovation. Harvard Business School published case study examining the Foundation's unique investment model that combined traditional venture capital metrics with impact assessment frameworks, measuring health outcome improvements. The analysis highlighted how this integrated approach identified overlooked market opportunities while creating both financial returns and patient benefits, suggesting potential application across broader healthcare investment landscape. The academic validation legitimized methods initially dismissed as charity by traditional investors who had failed to recognize market potential in women-focused healthcare solutions. Industry recognition culminated in Healthcare Investor of the Year award from National Venture Capital Association, acknowledging both financial performance and ecosystem development that had transformed regional innovation landscape. The award ceremony provided platform for discussing how personal experience with financial exploitation had ultimately created insight into power dynamics affecting women entrepreneurs seeking capital for healthcare innovations. Without directly referencing David or his family, I could articulate how resource extraction limits innovation potential, while boundary protection creates capacity for meaningful contribution. The professional platform created opportunity to advocate for policy changes supporting women entrepreneurs beyond direct investment activities. Congressional testimony regarding gender disparities in healthcare, research funding, and venture capital allocation highlighted systematic barriers preventing development of solutions for conditions primarily affecting women. The policy recommendations included both investment incentives and research grant criteria, modifications designed to address historic underinvestment in women's health innovation. International expansion began through partnership with European healthcare investors seeking to replicate our success in identifying overlooked opportunities in women's health technologies. The collaboration created Transatlantic Investment Syndicate, supporting companies developing solutions applicable across different healthcare systems and regulatory environments. This global perspective enhanced portfolio diversification, while creating implementation pathways for technologies addressing universal women's health challenges, despite regional healthcare delivery differences. Leadership development programs, established through the Foundation, created pipeline of women executives prepared for healthcare governance roles traditionally dominated by men. The initiative combined technical knowledge development with strategic networking opportunities, connecting participants with board recruitment professionals and existing directors seeking diverse perspectives. Program graduates secured board positions at publicly traded healthcare companies and major hospital systems, creating representation that would influence institutional priorities and resource allocation decisions. James's professional evolution complemented these developments through creation of digital health platform improving clinical trial participation for underrepresented populations. The technology addressed historic exclusion of women and minorities from medical research by facilitating recruitment, reducing participation barriers, and improving data collection from diverse patient groups. The venture represented both commercial opportunity and mission alignment with Foundation's objectives, demonstrating how our partnership supported individual contributions to shared values rather than resource extraction that had characterized my relationship with David. Our personal partnership formalized through marriage marked by thoughtful ceremony, reflecting authentic connection rather than social obligation or family expectation. The celebration included people who had supported my journey from exploitation to empowerment, with Catherine serving as witness alongside James's mentor from his early software development career. The event emphasized gratitude for genuine relationships, based on mutual respect rather than transactional dynamics disguised as family loyalty that had characterized interactions with David's relatives. The legal framework supporting our marriage incorporated lessons from previous experience while creating foundation for genuine partnership. Prenuptial agreement protected individual assets and intellectual property, while establishing parameters for shared resources and mutual support. The transparent development process contrasted sharply with David's hidden financial activities and unauthorized commitments that had undermined marital trust through systematic deception about resources and obligations. Home transformation included conversion of additional property acreage into environmental conservation, easement, protecting native habitat from development pressure. The initiative aligned with our philanthropic focus on wilderness preservation while creating tax benefits supporting foundation activities. The land management approach emphasized sustainable coexistence rather than exploitation, reflecting fundamental values underlying all aspects of life reconstructed since leaving relationship characterized by resource extraction and obligation. Manipulation. Financial prosperity enabled establishment of scholarship fund, supporting education for women rebuilding lives after financially exploitative relationships. The program provided both tuition assistance and mentoring, connecting recipients with professional opportunities leveraging their capabilities. The initiative recognized how educational advancement creates both immediate income improvement and long-term independence that prevents returning to exploitative relationships due to financial necessity. The most unexpected professional evolution came through academic appointment as adjunct professor teaching healthcare innovation management at Sacramento State University's MBA program. The position provided opportunity to influence future business leaders' understanding of both market opportunities in underserved healthcare segments and ethical leadership preventing exploitation within organizations. The curriculum incorporated case studies from foundation portfolio companies alongside frameworks for recognizing and addressing power imbalances that limit innovation potential. Writing expanded beyond the initial healthcare communication book to include memoir exploring transformation from financial exploitation to innovation leadership. The manuscript developed through collaboration with respected business press focused on resilience strategies and boundary establishment rather than relationship details, providing practical frameworks for readers navigating similar challenges without sensationalizing personal experience. The publication created additional platform for discussing how liberation from exploitative relationships unlocks innovation capacity, benefiting broader communities. Speaking engagements evolved from healthcare industry conferences to women's leadership forums addressing both professional advancement and personal empowerment. These presentations connected personal transformation with professional impact while providing practical strategies for boundary establishment and resource protection. The approach emphasized capability development rather than victim identity, demonstrating how separation from exploitation creates possibility for meaningful contribution beyond individual success. The most profound personal development emerged through mentoring women at various stages of extracting themselves from financially exploitative relationships. These connections provided opportunity to transform painful experience into practical guidance while witnessing others' journeys from vulnerability to strength. The relationships demonstrated how completely the narrative had evolved from victim, seeking support to empowered leader, creating pathways for others facing similar challenges. Therapy transitioned to executive coaching, focused on leadership effectiveness and organizational development, as foundation operations expanded across multiple locations. The psychological support addressed challenges of maintaining mission focus amid institutional growth, while developing management approaches preventing replication of exploitative dynamics within the organization. This evolution represented complete transformation from healing past wounds to optimizing future impact through thoughtful leadership development. Unexpected information about David's circumstances came through chance conversation with former neighbor at community fundraising event. The update revealed continued financial struggles despite career advancement, with his mother now living with him following his father's death and his sister relocating overseas after marriage. The pattern suggested persistent entanglement in family financial dependency that had destroyed our marriage, with new relationships apparently filling the resource provision role I had abandoned years earlier. This glimpse into alternate timeline, where I had remained in the marriage, created momentary gratitude for the painful catalyst that had ultimately created liberation from exploitation disguised as family obligation. The life constructed since that decisive moment included genuine partnership, meaningful professional impact, and financial security that would have remained permanently unattainable while supporting David's family's endless needs. The contrast reinforced conviction that boundaries protecting resources from exploitation create possibility for contribution, far exceeding what remains available when continuously drained by others' dependency. The Foundation's expanding impact provided most meaningful validation of the journey from exploitation to empowerment. Women entrepreneurs securing funding for innovative healthcare solutions, patients receiving treatments for previously neglected conditions, and communities benefiting from economic development driven by biotechnology investment, all represented ripple effects extending from that singular moment of clarity in the hallway. The transformation had created impact extending far beyond personal circumstances to influence healthcare delivery for countless patients who would never know the catalyst that had ultimately made these innovations possible. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us. 10 years after that pivotal ATM moment, I received a letter that brought my journey full circle. It was from David's mother, the same woman whose cruel words had sparked my transformation. The envelope sat on my desk at the Foundation headquarters for 3 days before I found the courage to open it. Inside was a handwritten note expressing something I never expected: genuine remorse. She wrote that after years of therapy following her husband's death, she had come to recognize the destructive family patterns that had driven away everyone who tried to help them. David was now estranged from her, His sister rarely called from overseas, and she was living in a modest senior apartment, supporting herself for the first time in decades. "I've followed your success from afar," she wrote. "The woman I dismissively called just the ATM has created more value for the world than our entire family combined. I won't ask for forgiveness I don't deserve, but I wanted you to know that you helped me finally see the truth about myself." I placed the letter in my desk drawer, neither responding nor discarding it. Some circles don't need completion. Some wounds heal better with distance rather than dialogue. That evening, as James and I walked through the conservation land behind our home, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, I felt a profound sense of peace. The path from exploitation to empowerment had been neither straight nor easy, but it had led to a life richer and more purposeful than I could have imagined while standing in that hallway a decade ago. The worst moment of my marriage had become the catalyst for my greatest transformation. Those 3 cruel words, "just the ATM," had ultimately funded not their endless needs, but my own liberation. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to our channel for more transformational journeys of resilience and triumph. Your support helps us continue sharing these powerful stories of overcoming life's challenges and emerging stronger on the other side.